Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning in to the LL3 podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful Swampy Mango, South Florida. And today's date is Saturday, December 7th, 2019. It's the anniversary of 78 years, if I'm correct, of the horrific event that happened on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, 1941. Got the United States into World War II. A lot of beautiful people have passed. Many of them saved lives. And there's even documented proof that President Roosevelt had prior knowledge to the event and let it happen. One of those disturbing moments, my friends. How to get into a war. Let it happen. Then everyone will focus on the adversary. Externally, that is. And of course, Executive Order 9060 was signed. Yet anyone is considered enemy combatants. Mostly all Americans, mainly from here, whether they're descent from Japanese, German, and Italian, without due process. The Bill of Attainder is called through an executive order. Very disgusting. Deserves no attention or love or exceptionalism. Yes, indeed, I hear stuff in the background. I'm at downtown, located at 10 South New River Drive, east, in the heart of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's along the New River, right under the southeast corner of the Andrews Avenue Bridge, right next to the Dade County Jail and Courthouse. So things you got to look at, folks. The past is today's greatest teacher. And of course, they want to re-execute it in different packages. And that's one thing you have to do, is to stay alert, pay attention, remain vigilant. And of course, the one gentleman, his last name was Odenez, 27 years old, was a victim of a carjacking. Getaway vehicle from two criminals with bellicose entities. Went from Coral Gables to Miramar. About a jewelry robbery. A lot of sides on here. And many people said that he was used as a human shield. The police shot him to murder, to take out the two criminals or suspects. Many people believe the police have murdered him in cold blood. I can't really jump to any conclusions, but things like this has happened multiple times around the country and the world. One thing we gotta look at. One, the police aren't obligated to protect an individual, even through those certain conditions. Sovereign immunity tort liability, 768.28, in the case of Wong versus City of Miami. It's just one case, and as an example. And if the two suspects would have been captured alive, they would have been charged for second-degree murder, with multiple other charges with that added. I can't really jump to conclusions in these areas, so I'm just giving you those facts. You can all look it up too, because the truth of the matter is, you got to study these laws. A lot of people still believe the police are protect and serve you. Mainly the public at the best of their ability. That's their oath. The human element. Could have been other areas that could have been prevented, that could have saved Mr. Dennis' life? Absolutely. A lot of questions. There should be a committee investigation on this as well. How to make things better. Another thing too, UPS needs to learn, and all the courier services, including the mail, the postal service, etc., learn how to teach them awareness. I mean, some of these people should carry, but that's their option. Have protective gear as well. Not gonna be perfect, but the employers and the employees gotta learn self-preservation and be boldly alert, or in other words, vigilance. Don't have all the answers. Okay, I boldly admit that. It's been a dangerous world since the beginning of time. It's a shame because he's a young man, 27 years old. He's a stepfather, taking care of 2 kids that wasn't even his, treated like it's theirs. So I see on Facebook a lot in all these areas, and gotta get out of this shithole town and all that. We gotta fight for what's right. Preserve our communities. Running away is not going to solve anything. Too many people try to leave a town because it's dangerous, and they find out they're going to small communities. It's not all that perfect either. So my condolences goes to those beautiful people that loved them. May so be forever free. We can all learn from this and teach your loved ones awareness everywhere you go. Don't take anything for granted. See all the chaos going on around the world. Hong Kong, Paris, multiple cities, countries, continents. A lot of mayhem going on. Pay attention, folks. Because we're not promised tomorrow. So, those are the areas even a person like myself have to be aware. Our surroundings. And trust me, you'd be better off. I'm going to be doing talk about a few things. Just to let you know, December 15th will be the passing of the Bill of Rights, which happened on 1781. The last state that did it was Virginia. And you could thank an author from the Antifederalist Papers, one of them, for his contributions. I'm going to be reading from here, from Antifederalist Paper 84, entitled "On the Lack of a Bill of Rights," by a gentleman with a pen name named Brutus. Many people believe it was a gentleman named Malcolm James, who was a well-known politician in New York, who was responsible for this composition and inspired to enhance our Constitution with the Bill of Rights, which means government keep out, to be exact. I'm going to start here. As it reads, it's from the federalistpapers.org. You go to multiple sites, you can get it yourself. It's not that hard. It says here, when a building is to be erected, which is intended to stand for ages, the foundation should be firmly laid. The Constitution proposed to your acceptance is designed not for yourselves alone, but for generations yet unborn. The principles, therefore, upon which what social compact is founded, ought to have been clearly and precisely stated, and the most express and full declaration of rights to have been made. But on this subject, there is almost an entire silence. If we collect the sentiments of the people of America from their own most celebrated declarations, they hold this truth as self-evident, that all men are by nature free. No man, therefore, any class of men, have a right, by the law of nature or of God, to assume or exercise authority over their fellows. The origin of society, then, is to be sought, not to any natural right which one has to exercise authority over another, but in the united consent of those who associate. The mutual wants of men at first dictated the property of forming societies, and when they were established, protection and defense pointed out the necessity of insinuating government. In a state of nature, every individual pursues his own interests. In this pursuit, it frequently happened that the possession or enjoyment of one was sacrificed to the views and designs of another. Thus the weak were the prey to the strong. The simple and unwary were subject to impositions from those who were more crafty and designing. In this state of things, every individual was insecure. Common interest, therefore, directed that government should be established, in which the force of the whole community should be collected, and under such directions as to protect and defend everyone who compose it. The common good, therefore, is the end of civil government, and the common consent the foundation on which it is established. To effect this end, it was necessary that a certain portion of natural liberty should be surrendered in order what remains should be preserved. How great proportion of natural freedom is necessary to be yielded by individuals when they submit to government, I shall not inquire. So much, however, must be given as will be sufficient to enable those to whom the administration of government is committed to establish laws for promoting the happiness of the community, and to carry those laws into effect where it is not necessary. For this purpose, that individuals should relinquish all their natural rights. Some are of such of nature they cannot be surrendered. Of this kind are the rights of conscience, the right of enjoying and defending life, etc. Others are not necessary to be resigned in order to attain the end for which government is instituted. These, therefore, ought not to be given up. To surrender them will contract the very end of government, to wit, the common good. From these observations it appears that in forming a government on its true principles, the foundation should be laid in the manner I before stated, by expressly reserving to the people such of their essential rights as are not necessary to be parted with. The same reasons which at first included mankind to associate and institute government will operate to influence them to observe this precaution. If they had been disposed to conform themselves to the rule of immutable righteousness, government would not have been requisite. It was because one part exercised fraud, oppression, and violence, on the other that men came together and agreed that certain rules should be formed to regulate the conduct of all, and the power of the whole community lodged in the hands of rulers to enforce in obedience to them. But rulers have the same propensities as other men. They are as likely to use the power with which they are vested for private purposes, and to the injury and oppression of those over whom they are placed, as individuals in a state of nature are to injure and oppress one another. It is therefore as proper that bounds should be set to their authority, is that government should have at first been instituted to restrain private injuries. This principle, which seems so evidently founded in the reason and nature of things, is confirmed by universal experience. Those who have governed have been found in all ages ever active to enlarge their powers and abridge the public liberty. This has induced the people in all countries where any sense of freedom remained to fix barriers against the encroachments of their rulers. The country from which we have derived our origin is an eminent example of this. Their Magna Charta and the Bill of Rights have long been voiced, as well as the security of that nation. I need say no more. I presume to an American that this principle is a fundamental one in all the constitutions of our own states. This not one of them, but what is either founded on a Declaration or Bill of Rights, who has certain expressed reservation of rights interwoven in the body of them.
How are we doing?
Good. From this it appears that at a time when the pulse of liberty beat high and when an appeal was made to the people to form constitutions for the government of themselves, it was their universal sense that declaration should make part of their frames of government. It is therefore more astonishing that this grand security to the rights of the people is not to be found in this Constitution. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed what Bruce has to say. I'll continue on. It has been said in answer to this objection that such declaration of rights, however requisite they might be in the constitutions of the states, are not necessary in the general Constitution, because, quote, in the former case, everything which is not reserved is given, but in the latter, the reverse of the proposition prevails, and everything which is not given is reserved. Alright, interesting there. It is required by little attention to discover that this mode of reasoning is rather specious than solid. The powers, rights, and authority granted to the general government by this Constitution are as complete with respect to every object to which they extend as that of any state government. It reaches to everything which concerns human happiness, life, liberty, and property are under its control. There is the same reason, therefore, that the exercise of power in this case should be restrained within proper limits, as in that of the state governments. To set this matter in a clear light, permit me to instance some of the articles of the Bill of Rights to the individual states and apply them to the quiz in question. I'll continue on. Yep. For the security of life in criminal prosecutions, the Bill of Rights of most of the states have declared that no man shall be held to answer for a crime until he is fully acquainted with the charge brought against him. He shall not be compelled to accuse or furnish evidence against himself. The witness against him shall be brought face to face, and he shall be fully heard by himself or counsel. It is essential to the security of life and liberty that the trial of facts be in the vicinity where they happen. Are not provisions of this kind as necessary in the general government as that in a particular state? The powers invested in the new Congress extend in many cases to life. They are authorized to provide for the punishment of a variety of capital crimes, and no restraint is laid upon them in this existence, save only that the, quote, trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury, and such trial shall be in the state where the said crimes shall have been committed, unquote. No man is secure of a trial in the county where he is charged to have committed a crime. He may be brought from Niagara to New York City, exactly, or carried from Kentucky to Richmond for trial for an offense supposed to be committed. What security is there that a man shall be furnished with a full and plain description of the charges against him, that he shall be allowed to produce all the proof he can in his favor, then he shall see witnesses against him face to face, or that he shall be fully heard by his own defense, by himself or counsel. That's good. Those are good questions. One moment here. For the security of liberty, it has been declared, quote, that excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel or unusual punishments inflicted. That all warrants without oath or affirmation to search suspected places or seize any person, his papers, or property are grievous and oppressive, unquote. These provisions are as necessary under the general government as under that of the individual states, for the power of the former as complete to the purpose of requiring bail, imposing fines, inflicting punishments, granting search warrants, and seizing persons, papers, or property in certain cases as the other. For the purpose of securing the property of its citizens, it is declared by all the states, quote, that in controversies at law respecting property, the ancient mode of trial by jury is one of the best securities of the rights of people, and ought to be remain sacred and inviolable, unquote. Does the same necessity exist of reserving its rights under their national compact as in that of the states? Yet nothing said respecting it. In the Bill of Rights of the states, it is declared that a well-rigged militia is proper and natural defense of a free government, that standing armies in a time of peace are dangerous, they are not to be kept up, that the military should be kept under strict subordination and controlled by the civil power. The same security is necessary in this Constitution, and much more so, for the general government will have the sole power to raise and to pay armies, and are under no control in the exercise of it. Yet nothing of this is to be found in this new system. I might perceive, for instance, a number of other rights which were as necessary as to be reserved, such as that elections should be free, that the liberty of the press should be held sacred, but the instances adduced are sufficient to prove that this argument is without foundation. Besides, it is evident that the reason here assigned was not the true one. Why the framers of the Constitution omitted a Bill of Rights? It had been they would not have made certain reservations, while they totally omitted others of more importance. We find that they have, in the 9th section of the first article, declared that the writs of habeas corpus shall not be suspended, unless in cases of rebellion, and that no bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed, that no title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, etc. If everything which has not given is reserved, what property is there these exceptions? Does this Constitution anywhere grant the power of suspending habeas corpus to make ex post facto laws, pass bill of attainder, or grant titles of nobility? It certainly does not in express terms. The only answer that can be given is that these are implied in the general powers granted. With equal truth, it may be said that all the powers which the Bill of Rights guard against the abuse of are contained or implied in general ones granted by this Constitution. So far, it is from being true that a Bill of Rights is less necessary in the General Constitution than those to the states. The contrary is evidently the fact. This system, if it is possible for the people of America to accede to it, will be the original compact, and being the last wilt, and the nature of things vacate every former agreement inconsistent with it. For it being a plan of government received and ratified by the whole people, all other forms which are in existence at the time of its adoption must yield to it. This is expressed in positive and unequivocal terms in the 6th article, that this Constitution and the law, quote, that this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby in anything in the Constitution or any laws of any states to the contrary notwithstanding, as long as everything's Constitution. Right, folks? Quote, the senators, so unquote here, next quote here is the senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers both of the United States and of the several states shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. So, good example, any local state representatives have an oath to defend both the U.S. and their own state constitutions. Like in Florida is Article 2, Section 5. Alright, so I will continue on here. It is therefore not only necessarily implied thereby, but positively expressed that the different state constitutions are repealed and entirely done away, so far they are consistent with this, with the laws which shall be made in the pursuance thereof, or with treaties made, or shall be made under the authority of the United States. Of what avail will the constitutions to the respective states to be preserve the rights of its citizens? Should they be pled? Should they be pled? The answer would be, the Constitution of the United States and the laws made in the pursuance thereof is the supreme law, and all legislators and judicial officers, whether of the general or state governments, are bound by oath to support it. No privilege reserved by the Bill of Rights or secured by the state governments can limit the power granted by this, or restrain any laws made in pursuance of it. It stands therefore of its own bottom, and must receive a construction by itself, without any reference to any other, for hence it was of the highest importance that the most precise and express declarations of the reservation of rights should have been made. This will appear the more necessary when it's considered that not only the Constitution and laws made in the pursuance thereof, but all treaties made under the authority of the United States are the supreme law of the land and supersede the Constitution of all states. The power to make treaties is vested in the President by and with the advice of the consent of 2/3 of the Senate. I do not find any limitation or restriction to the exercise of this power. But the importance of this article in any constitution may therefore be repealed, even without a legislative act. Ought not a government vested with such extensive and indefinite authority to have been restricted by a Declaration of Rights? It certainly ought. So it's clear a point as this, that I cannot help suspecting that persons who attempted to persuade people that such reservations were less necessary under this Constitution than under those of the states, are willfully endeavoring to deceive and to lead you into an absolute state of vassalage. Interesting indeed. Little history lesson there, folks, on the Federal Bill of Rights. And Brutus and many others question these things. That's why, for peace of mind purposes, that has to be achieved, which that happened on December 15, 1791, which means government keep out. Even if you read your state constitutions, they have Bill of Rights and Declaration of Rights. Government keep out, plain and simple. There's a lot of laws in the books right now, no matter what states, are conflicted with those subjects, and it's null and void, unconstitutional. There's things about prohibited laws, or post de facto laws. No bill of attainder. Language is on you. All you gotta do is read it. So it's good little educational ideology. from this person. That's why the Antifederalist Paper is just as important as the Federalist Papers, because you have to look at everyone's foresight, pros and cons. And the more you know these things, the less you understand how a constitutional form of government should be about. A constitutional republic, non-democracy. That's totally absurd. People love to use that term, but there's not proofs that show to me in both constitutions, the state and federal constitution, that says the word democracy in it. I don't see it in my books. So, well, the truth of the matter is, these are great contributions in what we have now. So, so that was pretty damn long. Sorry about that. This one here is pretty short. This one here came from the Future of Freedom Foundation, which is FFF.org. And so I'm tired here. The Right to Keep and Bear Arms. This is by Jason Hollenberger, who's actually running for president in the Libertarian Party. Interesting there, yeah? And I like his work, so here's what he has to say. There are among the gun control crowd who advocate repealing the Second Amendment. They think by doing so that they would be prohibiting people from owning guns. Unfortunately, they have a woeful lack of understanding of rights and the Constitution. People's rights do not come from either original Constitution or the Bill of Rights. That's why what many in the gun control crowd do not understand. They think that the reason people have the right to own guns is because of the Second Amendment. And the Declaration of Independence points out people's rights come from nature and God. Thus, even if the federal government has never been established, even if the Constitution has never been ratified, and even if the Bill of Rights have never been enacted, people would still have the right to keep and bear arms because people's rights pre-exist government and are independent from government. By its very terms, the Constitution does not give anyone any rights, including the right to keep and bear arms. The purpose of the Constitution was simply to call the federal government into existence and to set powers that would have if a power was listed. The government could exercise it. If a power was not listed, it could not exercise it. Thus, the question naturally arises, did the Constitution give the federal government the power to control people's ownership of weapons? It did not. That's because the American people did not want a government that would not have the power to infringe on people's natural rights, God-given rights. What about the Bill of Rights? It does not give anyone any rights. A careful examination of the language of the First and Second Amendment shows that those two amendments are simply restrictions on the power of the federal government to infringe on rights that are natural and God-given and that pre-existed the federal government. In fact, a better name for the Bill of Rights would have been the Bill or Prohibitions. Why did the American ancestors insist on passage of the Bill of Rights? After all, since the original Constitution did not give the federal government the power to deprive people of such rights as freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and the right to keep and bear arms. Why did Americans deem it necessary to expressly restrict the federal government from infringing on such rights? The answer is that American people wanted to be doubly certain that federal officials got the message, which was, don't even think of using your power to destroy our rights. Our ancestors knew that the Constitution called it a government with limited powers into existence, but they used the Bill of Rights to make certain that federal officials clearly understood that they were expressly prohibited from infringing on people's rights. What about the rights that are not expressly enumerated in the Bill of Rights? That was the idea behind the Ninth Amendment. It essentially said that the people have more rights than are enumerated in the Bill of Rights, and that the federal government is prohibited on infringing on those as well. What does that mean, folks? Checkmate. Thank you very much. Your defense mechanized rhetoric is negated. Thus, repealing the Second Amendment will not affect people's natural, God-given rights to keep and bear arms. For that matter, neither would abolition of the Constitution and the federal government. Rights that are endowed in people by nature and God are permanent and inalienable and exist independently from government. Yeah, Jacob Hornberger was right. I think I said John originally. Sorry about that. It was Jacob. Yeah, Jacob. And he's absolutely correct, folks. That's why when I tell folks about the Bill of Rights, I always use those amendments. And 9 is checkmate, plain and simple. And if the federal government does things that infringe on individual rights, we got the 10th Amendment. There's a thing called nullification. That's right. For any law that's repugnant to our Constitution is null and void. Not just the federal, but the state law enactment as well, which is the state constitution. Well, that's why always look things thoroughly. Like down here in Florida, they want us to have permits. That's a privilege. You got natural rights under Article 1, Section 2, which is entitled Basic Rights. They don't want you to tell you that. They don't want you to know this, but I do. Because the more you know, the more you implement it, the less you fear. And more you'll be laughing at these clowns in there with their suit and ties and their pretty dresses, with their rhetorical deception. You'd be laughing at them. I've been doing it for a long time. I sent them information as well. They don't like it, too bad. It's never been a privilege. It's been a natural born or God-given right. No exceptions. Not just for the right to keep and bear arms, but across the board. So, prove me wrong if you dare. March for our lives. Moms demand action. Enough's enough. Movements. And common sense firearms activists out there. You can't. Your practices are invalid. And what gets me the most, they try to combine it with crime. That's a no-no. It's called violating others. All you gotta do is read Antifederalist Papers 84. And plus, if you want to know about bearing arms, you want to see the people to bear arms, not just the Antifederalist Papers 84. You should look up Federalist Papers 2, 5, which is authored by John Jay, 29 by Alexander Hamilton, and 46 from James Madison. That's all you gotta do, folks. Do a little reading, got clarification. Think for yourselves, not what those dingleberries tell you. Hired fools. Let me do one more here. This one came from FEE.org, or FEE, an economics group. And it says here, Transferism, not socialism, is the drug Americans are hooked on. Now, who did this? One moment. This was done by Anthony Davies and James Harrigan. Pretty cool. But it says here, the United States has never had a meaningful socialist tradition, or even a semi-serious socialist party. Socialism in the United States is a fringe movement at best and always has been. This makes the sudden acceptability of socialism all more surprising. But with one avowed socialist, Bernie Sanders, campaigning for the presidency for the second time. Feel the hype, folks, 2020, right? And another, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, rising to a national prominence from her post in the House of Representatives. I'll say this. I'm not crazy about her either, but I know she voted no on language pertaining to the Patriot Act to try to revise it under some appropriations bill. I'll give her kudos for that, and her opposition on what do they call that? Ooh, facial recognition cameras too around the country, which I heard about it and I looked into it and I agree with her on that. But it doesn't mean we're going to be friends. Okay, let's keep that to let you folks know. American socialism more mainstream now than at any post in our history. Socialism is a response to capitalism. Listen to what they have to say. Complicating matters, socialism exists entirely as a response to capitalism. It has been the case from the time Marx first put pen to paper. And that weren't enough. The very usage of terms capitalist socialism has evolved past the point of clear meaning. Yeah, right off of everybody's propaganda playbook, right? These terms were once very clearly defined. Socialism is a state of the means of production. The intent that these means are to be used for the public good. By contrast, capitalism is simply private ownership of the means of production. The intent that these means are to be used to advance the interests of those who own them, which will in turn create conditions of general prosperity that can be enjoyed by all. It appears that what Americans really have in mind, what they think about socialism, is not an economic system, but a particular economic outcomes. When polled, Americans expressed relatively well-defined views on both. And while nowhere near the majority of the American electorate favors a complete socialist system, a recent Gallup poll indicates that more than 4 in 10 Americans think that some form of socialism is a good thing. But what is some form of socialism? A society is either socialist or it isn't. The state either owns the means of production or it doesn't. There is no middle ground. Even our openly socialist politicians rarely advocate anything near as drastic as government control of the means of production. It appears that what Americans really have in mind when they think about socialism is not an economic system, but a particular economic outcomes. And their thoughts seem to focus most often on the question of what people should have. The answer they arrive at most often, more than people typically get in the system based on a pursuit of profit. Capitalism, they believe, is immoral because it is a system in which some do without while others have more than they could put to use in multiple lifetimes. That's what that's what people assume because they were trained, they were being programmed. Alright? It's a programming game. As I always tell folks, I always tell my listeners, just learn these things. Don't listen to the boneheads out there. Read. Transferism is a more accurate term. These 4 in 10 Americans and the politicians who speak for them most vocally are not advocating socialism at all. They're advocating what we should really call transferism. Transferism is a system in which one group of people forces a second group to pay for things that the people believe they or some third group should have. Transferism isn't about controlling the means of production. It is about a forced retribution of what's produced. Federal transfers are money the federal government gives directly to people or to the state and local governments. These are not purchases. To transfer, the money must be given in exchange for nothing. The earned income tax credit, income assistance, and payments from various welfare programs are transfers. So too are Social Security benefits. While workers tend to regard a Social Security benefit as returns on their Social Security wage taxes legally, Social Security taxes are simply part of the government's tax revenues. Workers are not entitled to Social Security benefits. Who says so? The Supreme Court in Fleming versus Nestor, 1960. Interesting, right? In reality, Social Security benefits are simply transfers, gifts from the federal government to retirees. It's not a right. It's a privilege. Yeah, that's what happens, folks. When the government knows best, it turns to crap. How astute, right? At least at the federal level, our government has fully embraced transferism. Alright, it says here. Cool, I'll continue on here. A little chattering around here, so it would be pretty rude or discouraged for my listeners out there. Federal transfers to persons have risen from 11% of federal spending in 1953 to 53% today. With other persons, the federal government also sent transfers to states and local governments. Yeah, remember all those funding? Oh yeah. Federal transfers to persons and to state and local governments have risen from 17% of federal spending in 1953 to 69% today. As of today, almost 10% of what the federal government does involve simply taking money from a group of people and giving it to another. Less than 1/3 of the money Washington spends is spent in the name of actual governance. At least at the federal level, our government has fully embraced transferism, and both parties are responsible. Among the 4 presidents under whom transfers were greatest, 2 were Democrats, Obama and Clinton, and 2 Republicans, G.W. Bush and Trump. Oh my goodness, did I say Trump? It says Trump? Don't be offended. Transfer payments increase steadily over time. Partisan differences are a matter of rhetoric and public perception, not a reflection of any underlying reality. And according to this, during the Obama and Trump administration, actually from G.W. Bush and Clinton, it's starting to escalate. Okay, so it started to escalate from the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, New World Order douchebag that he was, and now Trump, he has that fetish as well, around 70% today. Interesting. Federal transfers as a fraction of total federal spending. Contrary to type, politicians speak in very clear terms about the benefits they would like to finance by transferring money from one group to another. They have had a predictable success with it. Most Americans cannot imagine a country without Social Security, Medicare, and earned income tax credit. See, Pablo Dog's training, folks. And politicians never seem to run out of ideas regarding where they might be able to achieve what even more transfers of wealth. New ideas are typically well defined, at least on the benefit side. Student loan forgiveness, universal basic income, Medicare for all, and every other piece of proposed redistribution legislation offers an obvious benefit into equally obvious group of people. The lack of clarity comes when the politicians get around to explain who will pay for it. Their answer is invariably some form of the rich, and who will finally, we are told, to pay, quote, their fair share, unquote. Of course, the rich, quote, as well, okay, so my mistake. None of this ever defined, which explains the United States present $23 trillion debt. Thank you, Federal Reserve. Transfers are tricky political business because politicians need to point to who benefits and by how much, while at the same time hiding who will actually be paying. Cronyism versus capitalism. As just as transferism is not actually socialism, the system against which transferist rail isn't capitalism either. When they think of capitalism, transfers imagine a moneyed class that defrauds customers, pollutes the environment, and maintains monopoly power. All because the moneyed class is in bed with government. But capitalism is simply the private ownership of means of production. What people are actually describing is something more appropriately called cronyism. which can manifest in a socialist system as easily as in a capitalist one. Cronyism isn't a byproduct of the economic system. It's a byproduct of politics. Of course. Remember, folks, politicians, how do you know when a politician is lying? When you see his lips flapping, right? Absolutely. For current examples, one need to look no further than North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela. Socialists say that there aren't examples of real socialism, and they are not. There was a time when these countries were indeed socialist, just as there was a time when the United States was capitalist. But cronyism has overtaken these countries' economic system, just as it did in humanity's greatest socialist experiment, the Soviet Union. Life was simply different from inter-party members than it was for workers. It is a real danger that all countries face, regardless of the animating principles of their economic and political structures. The obvious question that never asked is how much transferism we actually want. And this is where the danger of transferism should become manifestly clear, because transferism is simply another form of cronyism. In the United States' current iteration, the cronies are not moneyed elite who buy off politicians for their own benefit, although that still happens too. There are voters who reward the politicians who promise them a growing list of benefits year after year. The obvious question that has never asked, almost entirely because of our increasingly confused understanding of the words socialism and capitalism, is how much transferism we actually want. The intellectual shorthand of socialism and capitalism allows the turnout to be broadly inapplicable to our present circumstances, but our insistence on the categories virtually guarantees that we will get nowhere with the present discourse. How much transferism do we want? In order to figure this out, we need to come to terms with the fact that any transfer is a confiscation of wealth from the people who create it. That confiscation will decrease wealth creation in the long term by decreasing important incentive to take this risk necessary to create wealth. Second, we have to recognize that transferism is addictive. No matter how much we transfer, people will always want more. The United States $23 trillion debt, the largest debt in the world has ever seen, has come out because of American voters' voracious appetite for transfers combined with politicians' obvious incentive to provide them. In the end, we have our political discourse with two words are no longer much meaning: socialism and capitalism. Yes, so we can use the word. We have a transferist form of government, economically speaking. Correct? The solution politicians have found is to pass off costs of the transfers to taxpayers who haven't yet been borne by borrowing the money, thereby leaving to the next generation the problem of repaying the debt or enduring the unending interest payments. There's a house of cards to be sure, but from their perspective, it will be someone else's house of cards. In the end, we have polluted our political discourse with two words that are no longer... I think I already said that already? Yes. In the end, we have polluted the... Okay, we have polluted the economic discourse. Hold on here, folks. Okay, yeah. I'm just a little bit... He's repeating here, so sorry about that. In the end, we have polluted our political discourse with two words that no longer have much meaning: socialism, capitalism. In the process, we don't call the animating principle of modern American politics, which actually is transferism. The only winners have been the politicians who managed to gather votes by keeping the electoral rate in a near constant state of friction. And they keep winning if people keep thinking in categories that cease to have any real meaning years ago. Oh yeah, my friends, makes a lot of sense. Always beware of those terminologies. And when you think about that, we don't have a free market version of capitalism is much. More is corporate America. All right, and you got all these things called transferism. It has a lot of merit based on this article. And when you think about it, everyone needs to take initiative of looking at what we're actually using our monies for. All this foreign aid, to even, like Rand Paul said, zombie programs. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of crap been going on here for a very long time. And everyone's worried about one man who's president. If you had that one-dimensional mindset, then you're a damn fool. I hate to say it. But we all have the opportunity to enhance ourselves. Always be vigilant, like I said before, including our monies. Transferism is the key. If you like to use those other terminologies to get you distracted or have you guys fight amongst each other. When you see the bigger picture, you can throw it back at their faces. Look at these stupid debates you have. I'm waiting for the Republican one as well. I can't wait. We got all these clowns like Bill Weir probably use the same rhetoric. Who's a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, by the way? Another stooge that supports pro-police. I must wonder him or Michael Bloomberg are the Wonder Twins. So, like I said, folks, always examine the fine print. Don't believe face value. Alright, well that is it. I thank everyone for listening, but feel free to download and share us on social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, when we send something that's interesting you want to check out, whatever you do, please feel free to send it to Correspondence with Decorum. I will leave all this information on my footnotes. You guys can check it out yourself. So once again, thank you for your time. But always remember that demoniac resistance is helpful for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.